Dear friends, welcome. Thank you for joining us again this week to another lecture. This week, wow, we have a treat for you. This lecture is titled The Elementals of Nature. Now, what we have done is we have taken this lecture and we have divided it into 5 very specific parts. We are going to start speaking about the elements of nature. And as we cover that, then we're going to speak about how is it that these elements of nature come to be formed by learning about something called the tattvas of nature. We're going to learn a little bit about the creatures that exist within the elements or the elementals themselves. And we will learn also how is it that these elementals can help us within our own physical body. Today, we're also going to learn about working with the elemental devas of nature. These are those higher intelligences, those great divine masters, Buddhas, pratyekas, that are responsible for ruling and guiding all of these elementals. And we will close this lecture today learning about the exorcisms of the elements, which are part of higher mystical practices when we are working with the elemental devas and with other malakim of nature. So let's go ahead and let's get started with the elements of nature. And to get our broadest perspective on this, let's learn a little bit to what many esotericists, many great men and women who have come to unveil this wisdom have come to say about what are these creatures. And let's learn, of course, how is it that the great master Samael Aun Weor synthesizes the wisdom for us. Let's start with Helena Blavatsky. Blavatsky tells us these elementals that we're going to learn about, they are the spirits of the elements. She tells us these are creatures that have developed themselves in the 4 kingdoms, the kingdom of earth, of water, of fire, and air. And rather than us seeing them as if they were ethereal men and women, she says they are forces of nature, but nevertheless they are material beings. There is consciousness within them. It is just that they are invisible to us. And they are made of a matter that is more subtle than the dense matter here in the physical plane. They're made of an ethereal type of matter. And Blavatsky tells us these are known as gnomes, as sylphs, as salamanders, and undines, depending on the kingdom that they exist. But those are not the only names that they have. They are also known and referred to as peris, devs, jinns, sylvans, satyrs, fauns, elves, dwarfs, trolls, brownies, nixias, pinkies, white ladies, fairies, etc. We share these names with you so that if you happen to come across any one of these in literature, in folkloric tales, that you immediately can apprehend what the tale is about. What is it that they are speaking in terms of those forces of nature? But in the Theosophical Society, there's also Franz Hartmann. And Hartmann complements what Blavatsky is saying by adding, these elementals, he says, they do not have an immortal spirit, but they are made of the substance of the soul. This substance of the soul, dear friends, is one of those higher, superior elements that is known as the cosmic mind. Hartmann says these elementals, there are various degrees of intelligence. They live within the elements of air, water, fire, and earth. And he also says their character differs considerably. He even goes to say some of these elementals are beneficial and others are malevolent. And then there's Annie Besant. And Annie Besant says that they're divided not in 4, but in 5 primary classes: ether, fire, air, water, and earth. She says there are salamanders, there are sylphs, there are undines, there are gnomes. And she does not mention the names of those elementals within the realm of the ether. Those elementals, they are known as puntas and barbelos. We'll share with you a little bit of that in a second. But she goes to say, there are 2 other classes that make up 7. And she says, let's not worry about that at this moment because those elementals are not currently here in manifestation. And it's interesting that she says that. Samael does not tell us what are the elementals that exist within the element that is known as the astral light. Samael does not tell us what are the elementals that exist within that element that is known as the cosmic mind. But we know that there are 7 elements. And as a consequence, there must be these intelligences manifested in each and every one of them. Anibesan tells us their duty is to sustain the activities that are associated with the respective elements. And there is a great being, a deva, a god, an angel, an initiated master that is at the head of each one of these groups. And she says, these entities, these are their names. There is Indra. Indra is the lord of Akash. He is the god of ether. There is Agni. Agni is the lord of fire. There is Pavana or Vayu, who is the lord of air. Varuna, who is the lord of water or the god of water. And then there is Kichiti as the lord of the earth. Now, Samael comes to synthesize this wisdom, and he tells us, since ancient times, the creature of fire have been known as salamanders, the elementals of the air as sylphs. The beings of the water are called undines, nereids, sirens. Samael speaks about sirens. And he says, the creatures that live among the rocks of the earth were baptized with the names of pygmies, gnomes, etc. Ostensibly, the form of these creatures varies greatly, and the elemental creatures of the plants were formerly known by the names of sylvans and dryads and hamadryads and fauns. So there is so much here. Samael even comes to say, in terms of the names of the gods of these elements, in his writings in the book, The Perfect Matrimony, he says, Brahma is the god of the earth. Narayana is the god of water. Rudra is the god of fire. Ishvara is the god of air. And Sudashiva is the god of ether. But speaking about elementals, I guess that this is something that would certainly interest you because this comes from the traditions of the Mexican people of Oaxaca. And in Oaxaca, they know a lot about the Nahuatls. These Nahuatls are very interesting because these are animal forms of these elementals. And what is it that they do? When a child is born, what they will do, whether the child is born during the day or at night, is that they will create a circle of ashes around the house. And by morning, they come to look at what has happened to that circle of ashes. And they will notice that there are footprints. So with the rising sun, they come and they witness the footprints. And those footprints correspond to the Nahuatl of the creature that was just born. So if there are footprints of a mountain lion, that means that Nahuatl, that elemental entity within that child, is that of a mountain lion. If there are other footprints, well, whatever the footprint is, it corresponds to the Nahuatl of the creature. But they do even something a little bit more than that. They say the navel of the newborn is buried along the sapling of any tree. And what will happen is that the elemental of the tree and the newborn, they start growing together simultaneously. And they say the elemental of that tree can help the creature in many aspects of life. So if we, for example, take the navel of a newborn and we plant it next to the sapling of a pine tree, the pine tree is very powerful with issues and matters of the mind. And certainly by working then with the elemental of the pine tree, we can bring calmness, organization of thought, the ability to overcome many mental challenges in life, and so on, with different elementals of different trees. But there is something here that certainly caught all of our attention. Those members from the Theosophical Society, they say these are material beings that are invisible to us, but they are of an ethereal nature. So from where is that these elementals come from? Friends, this brings us into the topic of the tattvas, of the elements. As you heard us say earlier, there are 7 elements. These 7 elements, 4 of them are exceedingly common. You know them. These are the elements of earth and water, air and fire. But there is a 5th element, and that 5th element is ether. And beyond the ether, because the ether certainly comes from somewhere, there is the element called the astral mind. And beyond that, there is an element called the astral light. And beyond that, there is an element called the cosmic mind. In previous lectures, we have shared from the Hermetic teachings, well, how is it that the all brings everything into creation? And it says we are all a living manifestation, a creation within the living mind of the all. But of these 7 elements, they come to be because there are different vibrations of this ethereal substance that condenses and leads to their crystallization. So the different condensations of the ether result in the elements themselves. If we start with the element of earth, that is the most dense one here in this realm, well, the vibration of ether, or the tattva, that results in the element of earth is called prithvi. Then, the vibration of the ether that results in the element of water is called apas. The vibration of ether that results in the element of air is called vayu. And the vibration of the ether that results in the element of fire is called tehas. But the ether itself vibrates at a specific degree of manifestation, and that manifestation is called akash. That akash is what is mentioned in the book of Genesis as the waters of above. That is, the shamayim, those waters of above that are separated from the waters from below. And then there is the astral light. That tattva of the astral light is called adi. And the tattva of the cosmic mind is called samadhi. And if you have already created that connection between the experience of samadhi or samadhi and what this tattva is, then perhaps you can perceive how is it that as we work deeply within each and every one of us, and we seek to eliminate any inferior aggregates, emancipate the consciousness and allow the consciousness to experience that illuminating void, that bliss, that experience that the consciousness is experiencing, that samadhi, is the ability to be there and move within the purity of what is the cosmic mind. Certainly, the bliss and the happiness that comes from that has to be something beyond the ability of the mind to understand it and describe it. But we must learn about the tattvas, because these 5 elements, they exist not only outside of us, they exist within us. And if they exist within us and outside of us, then how can we work with these influences so that we can make the most of all of our projects, so that we can make the most of the situations, the circumstances in life? So let's start with Akash. Remember, Akash is the tattva, the tattvic vibration that results in the element of ether. And we know that our days are saturated, populated with this specific vibration when we go outside and it is dry, but it is overcast. It is not cloudy like the clouds are ready to dump a tremendous amount of rain on us. Certainly not. This is when the day is dry, but it is overcast. In these days of Akash, what is dominating is the manifestation of this tattva, and this is a tattva of death. The color of Akash is black, and the planet of Akash is Saturn. And by now we have learned that the archetype of Saturn, Archangel Orifiel, is the angel of death. So this tattva, when we are facing overcast days like this, how can we benefit from that? Dear friends, I want you to know that Akash, as it is present, Samael tells us, Akash is good for meditation only. These are great days for you to go and sit down comfortably, quietly, and calm that mind and meditate. Samael says, avoid business. Avoid love appointments during Akash, and that is because we're prone to making tremendous mistakes. So, to help us avoid complicating circumstances anytime that we are in Akash, that is a wonderful day just to do meditation. But then we also have windy days. And windy days are governed by the principle of air, which brings velocity and movement. These are the days where the tattva vayu is the one that is dominating. And Samael tells us, these days of vayu have their ups, their pluses, and their minuses. In terms of vayu is wonderful for us to do short, quick negotiations. Negotiations can get complicated. So Samael says, if it is a day of vayu, avoid getting married in days of vayu, because this principle of velocity and movement results in a marriage that is just short-lived. In these days of vayu, because the wind is heavily associated with thought and mental processes, what we also see is that people in general enjoy speaking ill of others. People in general enjoy being mischievous and cheating. But if we use it constructively, we can use the influence of this tattva for good intellectual work. So if you have to study these days, this is phenomenal. Because as you're preparing yourself for that final, for those tests, reading that material that you must present at work, etc. These are wonderful days for intellectual work. Now on the minus side of this, days that are heavily influenced by vayu, because the minds get heavily influenced by this principle of velocity and movement, because the thoughts can get a little out of control. There are suicidal influences. There are aviation-related incidents. And it should be no surprise to you. The planet that influences vayu is Mercury. And that Mercury, well, with the archetype being Archangel Raphael, or the wisdom of God, well, you can see how it will influence the intellect. Now, vayu has a color associated to it, and that color is greenish blue. But what if it's not just windy? What if it is just a hot day? Those hot days are under the influence of the tattvas, which is the etheric principle of fire. And Samael says, use this time for intense work. So whether you're working outside, whether you're working inside the home, or whether you are working intensely within you, comprehending, observing those inferior aspects, seeking to see them eliminated so that virtues can flourish. This is a wonderful principle to bring that into fruition. But Samael also gives us caution. He says, friends, during the days of devas, avoid the arguments, because the consequences of those arguments can escalate. I mean, this is the principle of fire. The planet of devas is Mars. And Mars, well, we know that Archangel Samael is that archetype that among the ancients was known as the god of war. Well, if we don't know how to bring that rebelliousness, that battle type of impulse internally, so that we can experience a revolution of the consciousness, and we exteriorize it, well, certainly there's going to be many conflicts. And Samael also says, do not marry in devas, because if you marry in one of these hot days under the influence of this particular principle, there are going to be constant quarrels in your matrimony. And friends, as we have observed, that is so true. Something that happens also in Tejas, explosions and accidents. And the color of Tejas as a tattva is the color red. But if it's not windy, if it's not hot, how about those days when you walk outside and all colors are so vibrant? Those days in which you look at things and everything is perceived like in an extreme high definition, where you feel that internal voluptuousness, there's that happiness. Friends, those days, those are days of Prithvi. And Prithvi is the tattva that results in the element of earth. Samael says, during Prithvi, you will have success in business. Any negotiation that you do in Prithvi is going to be successful. Prithvi will invite good health, successful marriages, celebrations. If we're doing conferences, lectures, congresses, days of Prithvi are the very best. Because Prithvi, as a principle, it invites love and charity and benevolence. And it should be of no surprise to see that the planet that influences Prithvi is the sun. The archetype of the sun is Archangel Michael. Michael, whom, like God, that is the meaning of his name. And of course, if it's the sun, it should be of no surprise that the color of Prithvi is golden yellow. And then that leaves us with the element of water. And that tattva is apas. So what about those rainy days? How about those days where you look outside and it's raining and it feels cold and you would like just to stay outside and have a hot cup of coffee or a hot cocoa and just sit down, cuddle, and relax? Samael says, these days that are influenced by this particular principle are wonderful days for businesses and long-term commitments. It's as if this principle just moved the psyche within the organism just to flow like water. Actually, Samael says, during Apas, that is a good time for you to purchase goods. He even says, buy your lottery in Apas. And everything that you can expect in Apas is the opposite of what happens in Tejas, which is the principle of fire. So Apas is influenced by Venus, and it is also influenced by the moon. So maybe now it is easier to comprehend why is it that if it's influenced by Venus, when it's wet like that and we would like to stay inside, it just feels so nice inside just to be able to cuddle with the one that you love and just enjoy those rains. These are these manifestations of the ether. So how do we know when is the right time to use each one of them? What can we use as guidance so that we can decide is it going to be Apas? Is it going to be Tejas? Is it going to be Prithvi? What am I going to do? Well, there is such a thing as a tattvic timetable. You see on the screen the image of Dr. Arnold Krumheller, yes, Master Wiracocha, that Samael speaks of so much in his books. And Master Wiracocha shared with us this tattvic timetable. And in this, he says, the tattvic clock starts at sunrise. This is very, very fortunate for us because we can go today and look on the web and we can see exactly at what time the sun is rising in your particular region. So this time zero starts at sunrise. And he says the vibrations take place in periods of 24 minutes in sequences of 2 hours. What does that mean? That means that at the moment that clock starts with sunrise, the first vibration that happens right then and there is Akash. And it lasts for 24 minutes. And as the 24th minute is ending, we start seeing the influence of Vayu. And that influence will also last for 24 minutes. And as it starts subsiding, the one that gains that momentum is Tejas. And as that flows for 24 minutes, the next one is Prithvi, which is earth. And then the last one is Apas, which is water. So it goes ether, air, fire, earth, and water. And these 5 manifestations lasting each one of them 24 minutes. It adds up to 120 minutes, which is 2 hours. So every 2 hours, this tattvic timetable starts again. This is wonderful because this suggests that if we had such a thing as an automated tool, imagine that you can do some coding in your computer and you can go and retrieve with some kind of API good information on any region on what is the time of sunrise there or here, wherever you are. You can have your computer telling you this is the current vibration of ether and this is the next one starting at this time. And ideally, you could coordinate your meetings, you could coordinate your critical events so that you can have the right influences for the right actions, projects, activities in life. So you would wait for APAS and that period of 24 minutes just to have conversations about long-term commitments and long-term business. You will wait for that Vayu so that you can have negotiations for short-term businesses. You would be watchful for when is that Akash is vibrating so that you don't have critical meetings, critical issues in life taking place at that particular moment. I mean, that is wonderful. This requires, some help because certainly this can get very complicated. And we will need some kind of instrument to help us know what is happening right now. But because when Samael shared this with us, was back in the late 60s, early 70s, Samael simplifies things for us and he says, how do you know which one is the one that's vibrating? He says, just follow the schedule of nature. If the day is cold, humid, rainy, you know that the vibration of ether that is predominating throughout the day is apas. He says, are you experiencing a windy day? Is there a hurricane? Those are days of Vayu. He says, if it is sunny and hot, certainly Tejas is the one manifesting. Says, is it dry and overcast? Yes, that is Akash. You go outside, there is brightness, happiness, plentiful light. That is a day of Prithvi. And Samael simplifies it in such a way so that we can see what is the predominant vibration of the ether at any given day. And yes, it is very true. There are days in which suddenly it's raining. Right, that is the right influence of Apas. But the rain subsides, the sun comes out, the clouds disperse. Suddenly everything is bright. You feel that internal happiness, there's plentiful light. Well, that vibration went from Apas to Prithvi. And we can see how they are dynamic. So whether you choose to go out and explore the tattvic timetable that Master Viracocha shares, or you choose to keep it simpler and be observant of the day and what you're experiencing, go with the direction of Samael, either one of them helps us structure our day in the best way. So notice how wonderful this is. So if we can work with these vibrations of the ether, and we know that these influences, they're available to all of us so that we can make the most of our events in life, so that we can do the best for each other as we sacrifice for humanity. How can we work with the elements? I mean, what exists within the elements themselves that we can work with? Because we have heard that there are intelligences within. Well, let's go ahead and learn a little bit about the creatures that exist within the elements. And let's start with the element of earth. Friends, there are 3 types of elementals of earth within the element of earth per se. These 3 types are all known as gnomes and pygmies. And the first type of these are the atomic elementals that exist within our body. Now, for all of these elements, there is an atomic aspect of them that exists within the microcosmic man, within your own physicality, flowing within your body and your tissues and your muscles and your organs, your ligaments, your tendons, your blood, the fluids in your body. We have elementals of air, water, earth, fire, and of course, ether. So there are 3 types of these gnomes and pygmies. There are the atomic elementals that exist within our body. There are those others that are something between 10 and 15 centimeters tall. I mean, that is what, 6 inches, 8 inches tall. And these are the ones that are so often mentioned in folkloric tales. These are elementals of earth that they just love to resemble human beings. And then there is a superior type of elementals of earth, a superior type of gnomes and pygmies that are alchemists. These are the ones that synthesize metals. These are the ones that deal with that science of the transmutation of the metals inside our body and outside of our body as well. Now, in the element of water, there are undines and there are nereids. In case you wonder, undines are freshwater nymphs. So undines are the elementals of water of the bodies of fresh water. So rivers and lakes, this is where we see the undines. Nereids are saltwater nymphs. They're called Nereids because they are the daughters of Nereus, the ancient Greek god of the seas. And Samael says both of these, they can be mischievous. And they are because they are innocent elementals of nature. I mean, they like to have fun as much as you like to have fun. But you remember that Samael said sirens. What about mermaids? Well, mermaids and sirens, they are also elementals of water. But even though they are creatures that exist within the element of water, they have different characteristics. Mermaids, as they are presented, are more friendly. Mermaids are more helpful. They're associated to the sea, they're associated to beauty. Now, sirens, you remember the words of Hartman, that he said that some of them are dangerous. Well, sirens are known because sirens are seductive. I mean, there are many ancient stories about these creatures of the seas that they use their beautiful singing voices and they bring those hypnotic states on the sailors, and because of that, though, many sailors just went to their doom. So there you go with mermaids and sirens. But for our purposes and the work that we are seeking to do with the elementals of nature, our focus is with undines. Our focus is with nereids, the nymphs of the fresh waters and the salt waters. Because within our constitution, well, we have both. And then in the element of air, we have sylphs and we have sylphides. The sylphs and the sylphides, they are pink. They wear pink and blue garments. They have vestments that are of these very light colors. And remember, because these elementals are there to fulfill the mission, the roles, the purpose of their elements, they are the ones who exercise those principles. So the sylphs and sylphides, they stimulate movement. Now the difference is that the sylphs, they are delicate ethereal creatures that are associated with wind, they're associated with weather. And the sylphides, they are a type of sylph, but that is associated with arts and creativity. So you can imagine that if we're going to be working with the elementals of air, we can then ask these elemental gods of nature to help us by giving us the authority to command their elementals, and we can ask the sylphides, the sylphs, to work within us, to help stimulate creativity, to help us organize our thoughts. Now let's look at the element of fire, because in the fire we have the salamanders. And even though every ancient artistic rendition will show you a salamander looking like a lizard, Samael says they look more like crickets. But nevertheless, the salamanders themselves, because they manifest aspects of character, just like all the other elementals, well, these ones symbolize those attributes of strength and resilience. As a matter of fact, there is an ancient mystical ritual in which the initiates are being told, may you be like the salamanders of fire, so that you can move within the flames without being affected by them. Wow, that is so beautiful. And of course, thinking about the element of ether, we have elements in the ether that are known as puntas, and they are known as barbellos. And these elementals of ether, well, they become very visible early in the morning. And the way that you perceive them is as you go outside and you look into the horizon. As you look at the mountains, you can see them as the blue hue that surrounds the mountains. Those are the elementals of ether. And of course, these all exist within the physicality. From the top of the head to between the eyebrows, we have an ethereal influence right there in the brain. From between the eyebrows to the heart, we have an influence of the element of air. From the heart down towards your waist, exactly to the level of the anus, we have an influence of fire. And everybody knows that we have our solar plexus, which is a plexus of fire right there, 3 inches above the navel. Then, from the level of the anus to the knees, we have the influence of water. So that includes the sexual creative organs, where we see the manifestation of our creative waters of life. And from the knees to the feet, the influence of earth. So knowing this distribution of these influences in the body, knowing what the elementals do, now if we have some ailment, we can ask these elementals to help us bring harmony, equanimity within the body, to eliminate, to alleviate any ailments that we may be experiencing. But to do that, we would benefit from working with the intelligences that guide all of these elementals. I mean, if you're, for example, a teacher and you're responsible for a group of children in kindergarten, you don't want anybody just to come outside and start telling children to do things, because they're going to create chaos. The ideal thing is that somebody comes and they speak to you, and then you can help guide the situation. Well, the same thing happens with these innocent elemental entities. They have a governing deva. And these elemental devas, these are the gods that rule the trillions of elementals that exist within each one of these elements. Now, these elemental devas, we can refer to them in many different ways. If you call them gods, you're not mistaken. If you call them angels, you're not mistaken. If you call them devas, you're not mistaken. These elemental gods are referred to by Helena Blavatsky as Buddhas Pratyeka's. There are 2 types of Buddhas. There are Buddhas of compassion, and they are Buddhas of contemplation. The Buddhas of compassion, they're called Buddhas Maitreyas. And those Buddhas Maitreyas are great masters like Yeshua ben Pandira, or Jesus, that come and receive a new physical form, and they come and work arduously for humanity. Now, the Buddhas of contemplation are those great masters, those initiates that do not take the direct path. They take a spiral path back into the absolute. And in that spiral path, Samael tells us, well, the sufferings in the spiral path are less than the sufferings in the vertical path, in the direct path. But Blavatsky says, those Buddhas Pratyekas, humanity eventually forgets them. And that has been the case with many of these great masters. These gods, these devas, these angels, they are initiates. They are illuminated beings. They are principles of nature. They are forces of nature. You see, they are many things. We cannot just define them as a single thing and try to put what they are within the context of a box, because that would be a disservice to them and certainly to us. But here with these masters also went through the efforts of the Buddhist annihilation. In previous cosmic days, many of these masters worked intensely within themselves, just as we are seeking, just as we are currently making an effort to work within our own selves. They were able to eliminate that secondary inferior nature that exists, that ego. They were able to work with superior forces of creation, like the forces of Devi Kundalini, to reduce to a cosmic dust those inferior aspects, to see the plenitude of manifestation of their inner being, of their innermost. So all of these devas, they are prototypes of perfection. Now you remember, Samael gave us some names for the lords of earth and water, fire, air, and ether. Blavatsky gave us some names. Ani Besant gave us similar names. And here, we give you more names. And there are so many names. Because you must remember that this gnosis, this wisdom, that is the root wisdom of all of the world's great religions, well, it adapts itself to the idiosyncrasies, the cultures of the people at different locations of the planet. Let's remember that different people are born in different places because we all have to satisfy specific karmas. Karmas of worlds, karmas of nations, individual, particular karmas. And because we all come together, because the exterior is dictated by what is in our interior, well, we are at a specific level of being can understand things if they explain it to us in one way, like in some area of the world, or if we get it explained like in a different way, like in another area of the world. There are many intricacies behind this. What is your ray of creation, etc., etc. But the important thing is that we get the opportunity of seeing all of these names. And it puts us in a very advantageous position because now wherever we see them, now we have an expanded cultural base. Now we have a better understanding of what is being discussed. So the elemental god of the earth, Kichiti, is also known as Gob, also known as Arbarman. The elemental god of air, Pavana. The elemental god of water, Varuna. The elemental god of fire is Agni. But if you're in this side of the hemisphere where we have the Aztec, the Maya cultures so close, maybe that sacred wisdom, that serpentine wisdom of the Aztecs and the Maya may resonate more with you. And among the Aztecs, these very same gods are known with a different name. The goddess of earth is known as Coatlicue. The god of air is known as Ejecatl. The god of water is known as Tlaloc. And the god of fire is known as Huehueteotl. And whether we know them with their Aztec names or their Hindi names, it doesn't matter. These are elemental gods of nature that have temples in each one of the four corners of the world. So if we face to the north, we are facing in the direction of the temple of the elemental god of the earth. If we are facing south, we are facing in the direction of the temple of the elemental god of fire. If we are facing towards the east, we are facing in the direction of the temple of the elemental god of air. And if we're facing towards the west, we are facing in the direction of the temple of the elemental god of water. It is important that we know this, because at any given moment, we can invoke of our innermost, and we can ask our innermost to present itself at the doors of any one of these temples, to knock on those doors, to do the necessary salutations before the guardian of that temple. And as we gain access into the temple, we can ask our innermost to take the 7 sacred steps towards the inside of the temple, to kneel before the majesty, the power of these elemental gods, and have our innermost ask for those things that we need the most. There's a mantra that we can sing before we invoke any one of these great masters of the 6th dimension of nature. Keep in mind that all of these Buddhas, Pratyekas, elemental gods of the elements, and other great masters, like Master Kamasot, they are all Malakim. You would remember there are angels, archangels, there are powers, dominions, thrones. There's Seraphim, there's Cherubim, there's Malakim. And the Malakim exists within the 6th dimension of nature. That is the causal plane. That is not only where every instance in life unifies itself as a constant now, whether it is a past, present, or future thing. It is all there. And that mantra is the mantra Aloha Va Da'at. When we chant this mantra, as we are getting ourselves ready to perform any of this work, this mantra is the equivalent of us knocking on the door of the sixth dimension. This is a mantra that allows us to communicate, to connect better with these great beings that are Malakim. I mean, they are on a dimension superior to the mental plane. They're in a dimension superior to the astral plane. These great masters are beyond emotions. They are beyond thought. So we can prepare ourselves to invoke these masters by sitting comfortably, by closing our eyes, by singing that first mantra, Klim Krishnaya Govindaya Gopihana Vayavaya Swaha, and creating, seeing the formation of that flaming star around us. We can sing the mantra Helium Melium Tetragrammaton, so that we can see that circle of light created around us. A circle of light that will keep at bay any inferior, nefarious influences. And within that magic circle, as we face the east, we can sing the mantra Aloha Va Da'at to start knocking on the door of the sixth dimension. Aloha Va Da'at. And we continue repeating that mantra. How many times can you sing that mantra? You can do it for 5 minutes. You can do it for 10 minutes. But what happens when you sing this mantra is that Aloha Va Da'at not only helps you get into a deeper state of devotion, it makes you more open to receive from these great masters. So we chant this mantra. We need the help of any one of these elemental gods of nature. Who do we call? Well, we can start by invoking the god Ehecatl. Ehecatl is the god of air. Ehecatl is Pavana, as Annie Besant was sharing with us. So we can invoke Ehecatl, but because there is some confusion out there, and we know that the intellect is so curious that many of you will be tempted to go look for stuff. You will see that there are many instances in which you will find pictures on the internet that says that Ehecatl is Quetzalcoatl. That is not true. Ehecatl is not Quetzalcoatl. To say that Ehecatl is Quetzalcoatl would be the same as saying that that Jesus is Ehecatl. Not the case. Two different beings, two different intelligences, two different missions within creation. But the thing is that Ehecatl is a Malakim of the causal plane. And he is that Lord, that God of air, the God of wind. And Samael tells us he is also the God of the night. Every time that he shows up, you will see him with a bald cranium. And he will be wearing a mask of death. Now that mask has very stretched lips. And that is because the lips symbolize the source of wind. They emphasize the power of the creative word. So as you see a Ehecatl, whether you see it chiseled on a stone as a glyph, whether you see it artistically rendered in any one of the codices, whether it is the Borgia, the Dresden, Bourbonic codices, etc., Notice that you will always see him with exaggerated lips, just like we see here on the screen. And here, not only we see a Hecatl sitting on a throne, on a stone, but right there, he is working together with Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. So here in this image, we see both the elements of air and fire together. If we're going to invoke such a master as Hecatl, if we're seeking to work with those elementals of air, what are we asking? Well, Hecatl can help us. He can teach us to unfold in our astral body. Hecatl can assist us when we are embarking in long or short trips. Hecatl can aid us with that principle of velocity of motion in our daily work. Hecatl can help us stimulating creativity, art, so that everything that we do is done with the greatest beauty possible. But Hecatl can also help us taking away an old illness. Of course, if it is in accordance with the law, because all of these great masters will not do anything that is outside of the will of the law. So if you are experiencing a karma on an illness, well, Hecatl could help take away that illness. If you're experiencing the karma duro of an illness, and remember, karma duro is karma that cannot be negotiated. It is karma that we must live through. Well, then he will not intervene. But if there's any harm afflicting you, if there is any bad influence, if you're dealing with an ill-willed neighbor, or perhaps if you happen to be the ill-willed neighbor, Hecatl can help move away those influences. And what do? We face towards the east in the direction of that temple of air. And as we invoke, as we ask for their help, as we ask for their permission to work with those sylphs and sylphides of air, as we command those sylphides to work in the name of the Christ and by the power of Christ, by the love of Christ, so that everything happens according to the law, not our fears and our insecurities, no, none of that. After we have asked for that help, we then sing the mantra H, and that H sounds like a very deep exhalation. And we can chant that mantra 3 times, 5 times. Samael tells us about Hecatl. When he speaks in one of his lectures to his 2nd and 3rd chamber students, he speaks about the Omeyocan. The Omeyocan is the highest of the 13 heavens. That is where the uncreated light, the unmanifested space exists. And he says, we also call the Omeyocan because of its winds and its darkness, Joali Ehecatl. And he says, because Ehecatl is the god of cosmic motion, he is the god of wind. So behold, the great cosmic motion of the Omeyocan, where the authentic happiness and profound eternal bliss are manifest, is because of this principle of Ehecatl. So let's say that we want to invoke the god of water. In the Aztec tradition, Tlaloc is the god of water. Now observe this mask that represents Tlaloc. Notice the eyes, because just like Hecatl is characterized by the stretched lips, symbol of the breath of life, symbol of the power of the creative word, here we see Tlaloc, and his eyes are always captivating. Those eyes are made by 2 serpents. Those eyes, if you see in those eyes the symbol of infinity, you are not mistaken. His name is very peculiar because it is a combination of 2 ancient words, Tlali, which means earth, and Ocli, which means wine. So Tlaliocli or Tlaloc means the wine that the earth drinks. And remember, it is not just the earth where we see the seeds and the grains sprouting and the agricultural business thriving. It's not just that. It is also the philosophical earth. And the philosophical earth is our own body. So this wine that the earth drinks, this water of life exists within our own physicality. This is water that is available right now to the work and the service of our inner Savior. This is water that when we transmute it, we can work intensely with the super dynamic of love and see the fabrication of superior bodies, like the superior astral, the superior mental bodies, the superior causal bodies, etc. Tlaloc exists within the infinitely small as well as the infinitely large. So Tlaloc exists not only in every drop of water that makes up all of the oceans and all of the lakes. It exists in every grain of moisture that exists in the air that we live. Tlaloc exists when you open the faucet in your house and you see that water flowing in there. We see the substance, the essence of Tlaloc. And among the Maya, it's not known Tlaloc, it's known as Chac. And Chac, well, we're not showing it here for the sake of time, but as we will present it in later lectures, you will see how Chac has a very peculiar nose, a very exaggerated nose that looks like a serpent that is rising. But speaking about the Aztec Tlaloc, the god of water, here in this image from the Borgia Codex, we see Tlaloc, and we see him moving a dark creature. That creature also have a mask of Tlaloc. That dark creature, that is you. That is me. That is each and every one of us. That is the representation of the sincere seeker who is embracing the wisdom of the waters. And Tlaloc is teaching him how to swim, how to flow against the currents. Here, Tlaloc is teaching, and notice that within those waters, there are the eyes of the all, always observant. This is beautiful. Tlaloc can teach us how to learn to listen. Because when we can adapt to circumstances, we can remain calm enough that we can perceive. Tlaloc can teach us about tenacity. It provides the primordial substance that is necessary for the death of the ego, because we can observe and we can comprehend, but our Divine Mother can take of this transmuted power of these creative waters and use it to reduce our defects to a cosmic dust. As a matter of fact, those 4 days that are listed at the bottom of that image, read from right to left, which is how we read the Borgia Codex, is giving us a teaching from Tlaloc. And it says, learn to listen and be tenacious. Develop your willpower so that you bring about the death of the ego by working with the sacred fire. This is the teaching of Tlaloc. As a god of water, it can give us willpower and steadfastness. It can give us power to battle our defects. Tlaloc itself will help unveil the wisdom of the being. And as we work with Tlaloc, as we invoke of those elementals of water, they can help us with the transmutation of our creative waters. These elementals of water, they can give us the ability to adapt to any circumstance, just like water conforms itself to whatever is the shape of the container that holds it. These elementals of water can help us restoring, renewing the flows within our body, breaking attachments. And to invoke of Tlaloc, to ask for his permission for us to work with the elementals of water, we have to face west. And as we ask our innermost to greet at the doors of the temple, to take the 7 steps inside, to invoke of this great master, to ask for the grace of Tlaloc to work with those elementals. As we ask the elementals to help us with things like you see on the screen, we will sing the mantra M, like this. Because M is the mantra of water. And how many times do you sing that mantra? You can sing it 3 times, 5 times, 7 times. But that's just air. That's just water. How about earth? Well, we can always work with Coatlicue. She is the goddess of the earth. Now notice that this rendition of Coatlicue is very beautiful. Coatlicue is the goddess of the earth. She is carrying skulls and hearts. The heart is a symbol of your heart, because Coatlicue has the power to crush those hearts. And that means that at some point we need to be willing to exercise some self-sacrifice. We need to be willing to look within ourselves at those things that we love the most about ourselves. The image that we have created about ourselves, the way that we have defined ourselves to be, any self-consideration, any one of these things that are so closely related to our prides. And we must be willing to sacrifice that so that we can give way to superior virtues, to superior faculties, powers that come from the being, not from the ego. Notice that she also has a skull on her waist. That skull on her waist, in this beautiful form of Coatlicue, is Tonantzin. That is a symbol of the Divine Mother that has been forgotten by men. And this representation is on the back of Coatlicue, because this beautiful representation is the light of the Divine Mother. What we see here is a representation of Kundalini, the igneous serpent of our magical powers. Actually, as you look on her head, you can see the snakes coming out of her back. Both of them facing each other, one to the right and one to the left. And emanating from her head, of course, all those feathers, that is a symbol of the rays of the sun. Coatlicue and Tonantzin are one aspect of light, and the other is a shadow. So Coatlicue is the serpent of the abyss, and her other name is Cihuacoatl. You can see her here. The same Divine Mother looking just a little different. Coatlicue, Tonantzin, she can help us gain emotional stability. She can help us set the right foundations for our internal work so that we can build something on a chiseled stone, so that we have a solid foundation to bear the weight of our work. I mean, after all, it has been written, don't build your houses on the sand, because the waters will come and the foundation will go away. So we can invoke the divine goddess Mother Earth and ask of her elementals to help us restore and repair our organs, to strengthen our blood, to strengthen our body. We can ask of those elementals to help us gain emotional stability. We can even ask them to help strengthen the structure, the foundation, the walls, and the windows of our homes, so our homes can withstand the earthquakes, the fires that will be coming into this humanity at some point. And to do this, we have to face the north. And as we face the north and we ask our innermost to present itself at the doors of the temple of our Divine Mother Nature, to present itself at the doors of the goddess or the god of earth, whether we call it Gob, Kichiti, Arbarman, to take the 7 steps inside the temple to invoke the Great Master and ask for their grace for us to work with their gnomes and pygmies of earth. And as we ask that everything is done according to the will of the Christ, to the power of Christ, according to the love of Christ, so that all things happen according to the great law, we sing the mantra I-A-O, like this. I A O, and that constitute one mantra. And we can sing that mantra 3 times, 5 times, 7 times. And then we give thanks to the elements, to the elementals, to the God, the goddess of earth. And that just leads us with fire. So what do we do with fire? Well, the temple of fire is to the south, and the god of fire among the Aztecs is Huehueteotl. Now, Huehueteotl means old, and Teotl means God. So Huehueteotl is the ancient god. This is the Ancient of Days. You can see his face. It's an old man. Samael tells us this is the first and the final synthesis of our being. Huehueteotl is our real being. So we have our being, our spirit, but our spirit has a father. And the father of our being is our real being, and that is Huehueteotl. If we want to invoke and speak directly to the Ancient of Days, if we are seeking for the favor, for the help, for the assistance of the Ancient of Days, if you're going to meditate and you're asking to receive wisdom from your real being, the mantra to sing is the mantra Pander. That mantra sounds something like this. Pander. And as you submerge yourself in meditation, you allow yourself to sing this mantra indefinitely until you find yourself in that deep state of devotion. And then ask of your innermost to communicate with the real being. But this is just to communicate with the real being. If we want to work with Huehueteotl as the god of fire, what exactly are we dealing with? Well, first notice that here in this image, Huehueteotl is wearing the mask of Tlaloc. So this is fire and water together. This fire and water, this is a very intimate sexual symbol. I mean, this is a representation, Aztec-wise, of the same lingam yoni that we see in the Hindu tradition. So what exactly are we dealing with? Samael tells us Huehueteotl. He is the Inri of the Christians. Inri does not mean Jesus Nazarenus, Rexio Deorum, or Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. It does not mean that. This Inri means ignis, fire, natura, nature, renovatur, renovates, ignis, natura, renovatur, integram to its integrity. So Inri, the fire renews nature constantly. That's what it means. So this is the Inri of the Christians. The Abraxas of the Gnostics, the Tao of the Chinese, the Zen of the Buddhists. Huehueteotl is the Agnus Dei. And Samael says, the atomic salamanders, the atomic elementals of fire that exist in our blood and our sexuality, they burn and they become savagely agitated with our animal passions. Samael says, our anger irritates them. So how do we work with these elementals in a way that is constructive? Friends, the salamanders of fire can help us. Not only they can help reignite our sacred fire, because they are an igneous principle, but we can invoke Huehueteotl, we can invoke the god Agni, and ask for their grace to work with their salamanders of fire so that they can destroy any incubi, any succubi, any dragons, any parasites, any entities that may be attached to our subtle bodies. Anything that attaches to the vital body and as a consequence has a physical effect within our body. We can ask of these elementals to burn and destroy any pacts of black magic that we had made in this life, consciously or unconsciously, or in past lives. These elementals of fire have the power to liberate us from many chains that we have thrown upon ourselves. And what we must do is face south. And as always, ask our innermost to present itself at the door of the temple of Agni, at the temple of Huehueteotl, and do there the necessary salutations, to walk inside the temple, to kneel, to prostrate before the greatness of this majestic being, of this powerful being. And once there, we can ask for their grace so that we can work with these salamanders. And as we ask for this help of the salamanders, and we ask that everything is done by the Christ, by the power, by the love, by the majesty of the Christ, so that everything happens according to the law. we sing the mantra of fire, which is INRI. In Hri. Just like before, you can sing this mantra 3 times, 5 times, 7 times. And this is how we work with the elemental gods of nature. But because we're getting ourselves ready to walk into our first chamber studies, I mean, those of you students who have been going through this sequence of lectures and you have been expanding that cultural base and you're getting ready to go into more in-depth knowledge and practice, let's learn a little bit about the exorcisms of the elements. Because the exorcisms of the elements are super important when we are doing work of theurgy, when we are working with great masters. We're going to leave the details of all of that work for when we are in the first chamber. But what is this thing called exorcism? Because there's so much Hollywood stuff around exorcism that some people get scared around it. And they shouldn't. Because exorcism, based on the etymology of the word, it means to call up or drive out spirits. What Hollywood has shown us is the exorcism of driving out spirits. But that is not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is that we are calling up these great beings. We are invoking superior powers. We are invoking the forces of nature that bring life into these elementals to help us do the work. And we start with the exorcism of water. Now, the exorcism of water is a beautiful, beautiful prayer. Beautiful prayer. It says, "Let the firmament from within the midst of the waters, and let the water separate from the waters from above from those below, and thus allow the miracle of unity to become manifest. The sun is the father, the moon its mother, and the wind conceived it in its womb. It rose from the earth unto the heavens, and then again from the heavens unto the earth it descended. I conjure thee, creature of water, so you may become a reflection of the living God and its deeds, the fountain of life, and wash away all the sins. Amen, amen, amen." Now, this is just the English version. And we share with you the English version so that you know exactly what is it that we're asking. But when we recite the exorcism of water, we do it in Latin. Because in Latin, these words are so much more powerful. And it says, "Fiat firmamentum in medio aquarum, et separet aquas avacis que superius sicur que inferius, et que inferius sicur que superius ad perpetranda miracula reunis. Sol eus pateres luna mater, et ventus van gestavit in utero suo, ascendir a terra coelum, et rursus a cielo in terram descendit. Exorciso te, creatura quae, ut sismigis peculum Dei vivi, in operibus eus, et fons vitae, et ablutio peccatorum. Amen." And this is how we exorcise the water. Friends, when we're doing work with elemental magic, when we are doing works of theurgy, we can exorcise the water and invoke the great masters of universal medicine, and ask the masters to deposit in those waters the medicine that we need to help bring healing into our many ailments. This is something so beautiful. Now look at the exorcism of the air. Here is in English so that you can see what we're saying. The exorcism of the air, as a beautiful prayer says, "The Spirit of God moved upon the waters and breathed into the face of man the breath of life. May Michael be my guide and Sabtaviel my servant. In light and through light, let my breath become the word. And I shall command the spirits of this air and restrain the horses of the sun with the will of my heart and the thought of my mind and the nod of my right eye. Therefore I exorcise you, creature of air, by the pentagrammaton and in the name of the tetragrammaton, in which there is firm will and right faith. Amen. Selah fiat. Let it be done. So be it." This is so beautiful. But when we recite it, we must recite it in Latin. And in Latin it says, Spiritus Dei ferebatur super aquas, et inspiravit in faciem hominis spiraculum vitae. Sit Michael dus meus et saptaviel servus meus in luce et per lucem. Fiat verbum halitus meus, et imperabo spiritibus eris uius, et refrenavo equo solis voluntante cordis mei, et cogitationi mentis mei, et nutu oculo dextri. Exorciso egitur te creatura eris, per pentagrammaton et in nomine tetragrammaton, incubus sunt voluntas firma et fides recta. Amen, Selah, fiat. So be it. Wow. Just imagine, as you recite this exorcism of air to help with, through the guidance, the intervention, the power of your innermost to bring calmness into your thoughts, to bring calmness into your mind, to help organize those thoughts, to bring quietude, to enable creative imagination, to enable artistic imagination. That is so beautiful. And then, of course, there is the exorcism of fire. This one, you can learn it just like this. And here we invoke these three great masters. We say Michael, king of the sun and lightning. Samael, king of volcanoes. Anael, prince of the astral light. Assist me by the Christ, by the Christ, by the Christ. And these three forces would manifest within their igneous principles, the fiery principles, and help us with the work. And last, there is the exorcism of the earth. It reads, by the pole of lodestone, which passes through the center of the world, by the 12 stones of the holy city, and by the 7 metals that run through the veins of the earth, and in the name of Gob, I conjure you, subterranean workers. And we invoke the presence of Gob. Remember, Gicheti, Gob, Arbarman, Quatlique, these are the names of the God of the earth. So we conjure those gnomes and pygmies in their name, so they do the work. Wow. It's so amazing. So dear friends, as you have seen, this has been a lot. But we wanted to share a lot with you today. This has been our lecture on the elements of nature. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here with us. Thank you for your participation, and may all beings be happy.